Welcome to Uniquely Qualified. I'm your friend and host, Liz Ficken, and I'm so glad you're here. Uniquely Qualified is a podcast that empowers guests to share their experience, strength, and hope in overcoming challenges in the spirit of mutual healing. We hope that you'll be feeling more aware, connected, and supported in navigating the human experience. I sometimes offer up disclaimers and trigger warnings at the top of each episode, but for today's, I just want our listeners to be aware that we are talking to a mama about some incredibly challenging medical situations that she and her babies live through. Uniquely Qualified community, you're about to bear witness to a love story, one with an against all odds happy ending. If you need to pause and walk away at any point to take care of yourself, I encourage you to do so. But I want to assure listeners that while this family endured more than most of us endure in a single lifetime over the course of a couple of years, there is love, light, hope, and power at each step of this journey. So, please allow me to introduce my amazing new friend, Rosie. Rosie lives in Washington State with her husband, Connor, doggy Buddha, daughter Luna, and triplet sons Leo, Mac, and Cruz. Rosie received her bachelor's degree in kinesiology from Western Washington University and her doctorate of physical therapy from the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences. She also has a holistic health coaching certification from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition and is currently completing another specialization certification in women's hormone health. Before taking time away from formal work to focus on being a mom, Rosie was a physical therapist for 7 years. She is currently building a women's hormone health coaching business. In Rosie's limited free time, she enjoys yoga, high-intensity interval workouts at V Athletics, where she is a founding coach, spending time in nature, reading, and connecting with friends and family. Rosie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So happy to have you here and eager for our guests to learn about the journey that your family has been on.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to share.
Yeah. So, Rosie, how are you uniquely qualified?
Well, I'm a mom of 4 kiddos, three spontaneous identical triplets,
Mm,
born when their sister had just turned 2, like literally 6 days before.
my gosh.
I learned to navigate an incredibly high-risk pregnancy, an almost 5-week inpatient stay for myself before labor, and 3 NICU journeys spread over 2 different hospitals that were about 1 to 2 hours away from each other, depending on traffic, ending with my son Leo's journey, landing him at Seattle Children's Hospital for 13 months. So I think I'm uniquely qualified because I made it through this and came out the other side a more open, loving, and stronger person because of it all.
Absolutely. And what I love about your story, Rosie, is there's so many parts of your story that people kind of sometimes in life just end up walking into unexpectedly. High risk pregnancy, having a baby or babies in the NICU, navigating a children's hospital. These are all things that people sometimes like you have to walk through, but would never have, you know, had any idea that, oh, families go through this kind of thing.
Oh,
So I
never.
appreciate you shedding a light on what this is like. And hopefully people who have had similar experiences will be able to relate to your story and feel less alone. And also, be prepared in case life hands them something like you
Yeah,
and your family were handed.
thank you.
Hmm. As listeners know, when we talk about birth stories or family stories, I like to take a step back and just ask guests to share about how they met their partner. So would you mind just telling us the story about how
Yeah.
you and your partner Connor met?
Yeah, Connor and I met at Western Washington University during our final year of school there. We actually were in the same anatomy class, which is really funny.
Oh, that is
And
funny.
we were like partners at one point, and yeah, it was just funny. We basically became really good friends just studying together. And
Hmm.
then yeah, the rest is history after that. So
Oh,
after school is when we finally started dating, and then how we took some time off and backpacked through Central America, and then
oh, cool.
got engaged and ended up going to PT school together.
Cool.
Yeah, and so we both ended up in PT school together, and then which was down in San Diego, and then after
Hmm.
that ended up moving back to Tacoma. Yeah.
Oh, great. And is
Yeah.
that where you're both from? Or are you from?
I'm actually from Federal Way, and
Okay.
Connor's from Tacoma here. Yeah.
Okay. Got some Washingtonians. I love
Yes, we do.
it. So, when did you get married? What year?
Um, we got married in 2015, so we've been married
Okay.
9 years now,
Oh,
which is wild to
congratulations.
say. Thank
Yeah,
you.
rounded almost hitting that decade mark
Yeah,
soon.
I know. We were little babies when we got married, and it's wild to
Yeah,
think. But
I love
yeah,
that.
yeah,
So, you've been together a while. When did you decide that you wanted to start having children and growing your family?
yeah. We were. I let me think. So we were married for already 5 years when we
Hmm.
decided we wanted to start having kids. We had like a strong feeling that, I mean, we knew from the get-go that we wanted kids, but we just had
Hmm.
a strong feeling that we really wanted to just play and have fun in our marriage before having
Yeah.
kids. That
Uh-huh.
was just our idea. We're like, okay, we're getting married young. We knew that, but there was no rush to have babies. So
Hmm.
we did a lot of travel and yeah, just built our careers. And so it wasn't until I guess 2021 that I had Luna.
Great. I love that you made the decision to, just play and
Yeah,
enjoy the marriage and enjoy
yeah,
each other and then start having a family.
yeah. And I think honestly, it was like one of the best decisions for us personally because we had such a strong relationship built before we got thrown into this chaos.
Oh my gosh, that just gave me goosebumps because knowing your story, we'll learn
Yeah,
more today. I'm just like, yeah, they needed to be a team
yeah,
when they enter this next chapter.
totally.
You really knew each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I guess as a transition,
Hmm.
you have Luna when she in 2021,
Hmm.
and then I thought I would just read an excerpt from something that your fitness family, if I may call the
Yeah,
athletics that, they published a blog post that they titled "The Unstoppable Love Story of Rosie and Leo," which that in pre-show, as I mentioned, even just the title gets me a little bit choked up. But for our listeners, I think this does a nice flyover about what we're going to get into specifically today. Rosie discovered she was pregnant with spontaneous identical triplets in the fall of 2022. With no history in their families of multiples, Rosie and her husband Connor were shocked to learn that their 1-year-old daughter Luna would soon have 3 siblings. Not only was Rosie carrying triplets, but the pregnancy was extremely high risk, with the 3 boys sharing one placenta and 2 of them sharing an amniotic sac. The chances of this occurring are less than 1 in 100 million to potentially 1 in 250 million, so extremely rare.
yeah,
Rosie was admitted to St. Joseph's Medical Hospital at 26 weeks pregnant. Leo, Mac, and Cruz were born at 30.5 weeks. After a 52-day stay in the NICU, Mac and Cruz were thriving and well enough to go home. However, their identical brother Leo was just starting his journey. So again, listeners, that was a quick flyover. Rosie is going to walk us through some of the specifics here. Um, how about we start, Rosie, if you're comfortable with it, with
yeah,
just when you find out you're pregnant.
yeah.
And like, let's just start at the
The very
beginning.
beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. So we were trying for baby number two.
Hmm.
We were, yeah, baby number two, not
Hmm. Yeah.
knowing two, three, and four. Um, and with the thought process that like, okay, Luna will be a little over two. I think she would have been 2 years and 3 months old if they were
Hmm.
born at their normal due date. And we're like, okay, that feels like a good distance for us. And so, yeah, fortunately, we got pregnant and went in for our first ultrasound. And I remember being like kind of cocky and being like, oh, I've done this before. Like,
Hmm.
not a big deal. Like if you want to come, great, but
Yeah.
they're gonna date the baby. And so anyways, Connor ended up coming and we're sitting in the room and the ultrasound tech is like taking a while to find the babies. And in my head, I'm thinking, my goodness, like there's no baby in there,
Oh,
because she just
yeah.
was taking a while. And what I didn't mention before is my very first pregnancy before I ended up having Luna, what I did have a miscarriage. And so, there was a
Mm.
little bit of fear there, like, okay, is there even a
Totally.
baby? And then just super blunt and straight, she was like, okay, I see 3 babies.
Whoa.
And yeah, I look up at him and I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. Like, I knew that there's no way. an ultrasound tech could like joke about something like that.
Oh my gosh, right.
But like in my head, I'm thinking this isn't possible. Like I never in a million years thought that I could have been pregnant with twins, let alone triplets. And yeah, I actually started hyperventilating. And
Yeah.
she was like telling me, I was like laughing, hyperventilating because
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe it was true. And she was telling me, asking me to please like hold my breath at one point because she couldn't get the heart rates of them
Oh,
because I was breathing so fast
oh my
and my
gosh.
belly was shaking. Yeah, so it was quite the shock. It took me
Yeah.
a long time to like kind of come to terms with it. Like it's a beautiful blessing and no way are we ready for this. This is insanity. Like why was
Yeah.
this given to us, you know?
Yeah.
Just so many emotions where I'm like, is this possible? Can we do this? There was some denial even just being like, how are all three of them even going to make it? Like that probably is not likely. And just,
Yeah.
it was pretty intense. So we
And
went,
sorry,
oh
didn't mean
no,
to
go
talk over
ahead.
you.
That was
I was
it.
just gonna say, in this day and age, when I hear about multiples, my mind goes to IVF, where
Right.
and you were very clear when we first started talking, like, this is spontaneous. This,
I
and that
mean,
just like, I think a lot of us just accept that when it's like,
mhm.
oh yeah, sometimes that, when you're doing fertility treatment, sometimes you get more than one. And you're like, no, this was spontaneous triplets.
Yeah, right. And
Hmm.
so I think that that's a common question I get is like, were you doing
Mm-hmm.
fertility treatment or IVF or anything? And I know having known people that have gone through that, yeah, they are told when it happens, like, oh, if we
Hmm.
put, two eggs in there, one could split, you could have triplets or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just a complete surprise. And then with them being identical, it wasn't even that like I ovulated two eggs. It was just one egg and one sperm that split three ways. So it's just so the odds are pretty insane.
Wow.
Yeah.
Your three little miracles.
Yeah,
Uh,
totally. So, do you want me to just kind of go into what happens next through
yeah,
there?
that would be
Okay.
great. Yeah.
Okay. So then I just kind of spent the next remainder of my pregnancy like transitioning care. I was initially with a midwife, and she was like, "Well, you've definitely risked out of my office, so we're going straight to
Uh,
maternal fetal medicine." I had an amazing OB. She's incredible. I always recommend people to see her. But she was on it with me. We had ultrasounds initially like every other week, and they were constantly dating and tracking the babies, seeing how they were growing. And basically, because it was identical triplets with you had shared at the beginning that two of them were sharing an amniotic sac.
mhm.
What that means is that uh, both the babies, it was Mac and Leo that were in the amniotic sac sharing. Both the babies shared like a room, and so the danger of that is that their umbilical cords can get twisted up around each other, especially when they're really little. They can like, do somersaults and spin around within a sack. But then as they get bigger, those cords get pulled tighter and tighter. And so it can become super problematic if it like is wrapped around one of their necks or there's a knot
Yeah.
or things like that. And so that was pretty much our one of our biggest risks. And then the second biggest risk was because they were all sharing one placenta, it meant that they were all sharing the same blood supply. Um,
Mm,
and where that can become a problem is like if one of the babies starts suddenly growing quicker and like taking a lot of the blood, it can actually shift blood away from the other babies.
mm,
Um, yeah, which is called twin to twin transfusion syndrome. So we were monitored so frequently for that reason. And throughout the pregnancy, there was periods of time where Leo in particular, he had something called a velamentous cord, where his cord wasn't fully attached to the placenta. There was some, confusion on whether it was fully attached or if it was just more on the placental membranes. But basically, what happened was that he didn't have forward moving blood supply the entire pregnancy. And there was periods of time where his blood supply kind of went like intermittent absent, where it would like pause for a
mm.
second. And then one or two times where it actually reversed a little. And whenever that happens, If it's consistent, that's like immediate C-section. But
Oh,
if they're not at 24 weeks, then we run into the issue of like, oh, they're not viable. So like, what happens
okay.
here?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a pretty scary pregnancy. I feel
Yeah.
like there was a completely different than my daughter, where I was like feeling great, working out all the time, just like had really minimal symptoms. With the boys, I was growing like you could not believe how fast I was growing. Every week, I took a picture of my belly, and like I think by 24 weeks, I was considered full term in terms of size of my belly. Like I was 40 weeks, that similar to where I was with Luna. Um,
Wow.
yeah, and at 12 weeks, I had no belly. So going from 12 to 24 weeks, I like literally just popped so big. It was insanity. Um,
And you're a pretty small person.
I'm
I've
small.
never met
I'm
you in
five
person.
two.
You're 5'2", yeah.
Yes, I'm
Yeah,
small and I'm
mama.
petite. So,
Yeah.
between 24 and 30 weeks, like I think it looked like I was going to topple over.
Oh my
If
gosh.
when people saw me out and about, they'd be like, "Oh, do any day," and I'm like, "Yeah."
Uh,
I'm just not
yeah.
going to say anything.
Yeah.
Um,
So that sounds pretty uncomfortable, I would imagine, if you're
yes, it was very
growing that
uncomfortable.
quickly.
Yeah,
Did you have other pregnancy symptoms? I guess what I'm saying pregnancy symptoms, I'm meaning things like morning sickness. Like
yeah.
I know so many mamas trimester one just like fatigue like crazy. Did you have
Yeah,
that?
I did. So my first
Yeah.
trimester was really different. With Luna, I had a little bit of nausea, but if I ate, I was fine.
Hmm.
And then with the boys, I was just nauseous all day. But
Oh.
I've never been the person that like throws up with pregnancy. I just am just constantly nauseous. And so it actually was harder because with their pregnancy, I didn't feel like eating at all. But everyone was telling me you have to eat a ton. Like with a triplet pregnancy, they get on you about protein. Like I actually at one point was like chugging protein shakes just to get my like daily quota. Some of the OBs wanted me to get anywhere from 150 to 200 grams of protein a day.
My
Just
gosh.
insanity.
It's like
Like
trying to override your brain, like, I'm full, I'm
I am
full.
full, and the babies are pushing on your belly, your stomach, so you
Right.
really don't feel hungry.
Oh,
But just to give you like an idea, I didn't gain that much more weight with the boys than I did with Luna because I feel like everything I ate, they just took from me. So like
yeah.
I just had this huge belly, but my like arms and legs were getting smaller. It was really important weekly weight checks once I got into the hospital where they were like, nope, we need to up your calories. So it was really hard. I had to eat so much food. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do
So
you mind if
anyway.
yeah, that's anything else you wanted to share, I welcome. I did just want to take a quick step back and ask about, you were describing the placenta was shared and that there were
Hmm.
two amniotic sacs. For people
Correct.
like me who haven't been through this process personally, have only been like a bystander of other people's family journeys. With multiples, is it typical? Would the expected outcome be three placentas, three amniotic sacs?
Yes.
How does that, okay, that's how it usually works.
That's what it would usually be. So
Okay.
it all depends on when the babies split, if they're
Okay.
identical. So if they're
Okay.
fraternal, they come in with their own placenta and their own sac already because they have separate egg and sperms, right?
Okay. Hmm.
But if they're identical, if they split, from my understanding, if they split within the first 3 days, then they'll have separate placentas and separate sacs. And then if they split after 3 days, they'll share one placenta. And then I can't remember the exact time frame, but it's even a little bit later, like I want to say around 5, 6, or 7 days, is when Mac and Leo split. And then they ended up as two babies, but within the same amniotic sac. So yes, normally it would be they'd have three sacs and three placentas. Unless they're identical, then usually they know that they're identical because they had a shared placenta. But some identical babies will have split placentas, and then you wouldn't know unless you got their DNA tested after the fact.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm sure other people out there are like, of course,
Yeah.
Liz, but I just wanted to make sure that that was
No, that
clear.
was
I also, and again, not a medical professional, probably a silly question, but you mentioned that they were right away able to start tracking on each of them individually. but they're
Yeah.
identical. Can you help me
Yes.
understand how they were able to distinguish, okay, this is Mac and Leo over here, this is Cruz over here. How does
Yeah.
that work?
It was really hard.
Okay.
There actually was one ultrasound tech that was really good. And
Okay.
she got thrown at me a lot because people were like, you know them. You know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And other people would come in and just be like, you could tell their heads were just spinning. Like not only having triplets, but not being able to like, yeah, piece apart who is who. They had a
Yeah.
couple anatomy things that we figured out and were able to kind of make sure we were tracking the right baby. It was just like
Hmm.
little things like Leo, which I'll talk about, like his heart was shifted a little bit. So as long as they could see that baby, the heart is not directly on the left, it's more in the middle of the chest, that's Leo. And
Mm.
then Cruz, since he had his own sac and he sat above, we knew that was Cruz. So anyways,
Okay.
it was just yeah, it was hard. And even the OBs, they'd come in and they'd do their own little things, and then they'd be like, "Oh, we need that ultrasound tech. Her name was Danielle. Can you come bring her back in and like have her tell me where they are because they're just all over the place."
Oh my
So it was
gosh.
really, really hard, which is something that we ran into all the way up until they were born, just tracking them and yeah, challenging.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Danielle, good job. We
Yeah.
love a
Yeah.
seasoned provider.
She was great. She was
That's
great.
um so maybe this will be the opportunity that I introduce just the definition from the Cleveland Clinic of what a high risk pregnancy is.
Sure.
I think a lot of us colloquially are aware, but just for our listeners, um, a high risk pregnancy is a pregnancy that involves increased health risk for the pregnant person, fetus, or both. This can sometimes be due to health conditions, but it often requires specialized care and close monitoring to prevent or manage complications. So, with your pregnancy, Rosie, it sounds like you were right away getting monitored extensively. When was there kind of an uptick in, okay, so it's high risk because of multiples. Is that the
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
indicator of high risk?
Hmm.
And then we're wanting to monitor this. When is it like, okay, there's something that we need to really make sure that we're keeping an eye on her and these
Yeah.
triplets?
Yeah. So we got to a point where I think, gosh, let me think about this. Um, Well, I think it was around 18 weeks that we had our anatomy scan,
Okay.
and that's when we started to see that Leo had some changes in his blood supply that we really needed to keep a close eye on.
Yeah.
And then also, that was at the point where we noticed that his heart was shifted a little bit, and that was the only thing that we could see. Nothing else, any of his other congenital abnormalities never showed up during the pregnancy. We did end up getting an echocardiogram and a really extensive ultrasound, like more than the one that they did at St. Joe's. They sent me up to Seattle Children's and we
Mm,
did like both of the two more, an echocardiogram and another anatomy ultrasound by the specialists up there to take a look.
mm,
And they said his heart looks great. His heart is functioning normally. There's nothing concerning about it except for we don't know why it shifted.
mhm.
But the biggest challenge is that he was smack dab in the middle of Cruz and Mac. And so it was really hard to get all sides of him because
Yeah.
it's not like we could be like, can you turn a little bit and
Yeah.
let's get the right side of your lungs or whatever. So
Yeah.
so there were some days where I just couldn't do it. And I remember like joking with some of the techs where I was like, I can't, they were like, oh, I'm not getting a good read on his heart. And I was like, let me get up and go to the bathroom and I'll jump up and down a couple times and see if I can like shift him around. And
Yeah.
sometimes it worked. So,
Wow.
yeah, so that's when we first started seeing like, okay, this is getting to be very high risk. And I think I had told you before that this is when we got asked for the second time about whether we wanted to consider any sort of laser ablation, which is terminating the pregnancy or
Hmm.
terminating um, a portion of the pregnancy. So, what I didn't understand is that when you first get pregnant with triplets, this was kind of a shock. It's like medical protocol that the OB that's working with you asks if you want to keep the pregnancy. And normally, I feel like in any pregnancies, like they don't do that. If someone wants that, they come up with it on their own. But with
Yeah.
all triplet pregnancies, I've since learned that they ask everybody. And I imagine it's just because it's so overwhelming for the family. But the first time we heard that, we were just like, no, like
Hmm.
we are confident that this was the plan for us. And while
Yeah.
it's hard, we're going to carry through.
Hmm.
And then at 18 weeks, we were asked again. And this time it was asked with like much more emotional challenge put on us because basically they said, hey, we don't know what's going to happen with Leo. His blood supply is looking worse. And if it continues in the direction it's going, it's possible that he will die. And, allowing that to happen naturally is one thing. But if it does happen naturally, because he is an identical, sharing these placentas with his two brothers, he could actually create major shifts in the blood supply through the placenta and cause Mac and Cruz to have a stroke and die, or be
Okay.
left with like significant developmental problems because of it. And so it was so much pressure put on us to be like, hey, like you could make no decision and then end up with like all of them dead or two of them really injured, or you can make no decision and everyone lives and it's all okay. Or you can end the life of Leo. And it was just like, I just remember thinking, how is this even a decision for me to make? It's an impossible decision.
Absolutely.
And I just felt like there's no way I could do that. If there is it's just a tiny little chance that this little guy could live and everyone could be happy. And like, look where we are. Like,
Hmm.
here they all are, just these beautiful little beings. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we ended up having to have like multiple tests and scans and basically people telling us like here's the risk and we're like we're going to carry through, let's see what
Hmm.
happens. So I'll just go into the rest of my pregnancy if you want, or did you have more questions there?
I had a quick couple questions because I
Yeah.
know that we're only like halfway through your pregnancy story.
Yeah.
Do you know if the offer up for triplet pregnancy termination is that just Washington State? Do you know if there's like a delineation just because of how the current regulatory environment
That's a really
around?
good question.
Just curious if you know. I don't expect you to know, but just curious if
Yeah.
that's specific to where we live
Yeah,
or
that's a really good question. I don't know.
okay.
It changed a lot already, even since
Yeah.
then.
Hmm.
But I think from my understanding, just from like those I've talked to. I am a part of a triplet moms group on Facebook. It's
Yeah.
literally called Moms of Triplets. So if you're pregnant with triplets, make sure you join that group.
Yes.
Um, and it seems like it's just standard throughout
Standard.
everyone on that group that they have been
Okay.
asked that. I mean, because
Okay.
every now and then someone will post and be like, oh my God, I can't believe they asked me. And then the responses are all like, oh yeah, everyone gets asked.
Okay.
So
Not that I
not really
expect you.
sure.
Yeah, and that question was just because I know that you are, and as our listeners will become more aware, just you're very researched and aware, and you do the work to learn as much as you can. So I was just
Yeah,
curious, because yeah, it has been since 2022. It's definitely been a changing environment,
things have been changing.
and similar to that, did you as they were asking you the questions about this decision, did you feel pressured? Like, was there any sort of
No.
okay, okay. Real
Thankfully, no, I didn't. And I actually even asked my OB at one point, like, I strongly felt like there's no way I could do that. Like, I've already,
right.
I have these beautiful babies that are, my belly was huge by then. It was,
Yeah.
18 weeks. And I was like, I feel like at this point, these guys were going to be in my family. But I did want to hear what the OB had to say. And I asked her, and I was like, what would you do?
Hmm.
And she was so sweet giving her opinion, and she was just she didn't really give me like a set answer, but it made me think that I don't think she would have either, but that
Yeah.
she just felt like she had to ask because it's her
Okay.
job.
Okay.
So she really wasn't pushing me anyway. She just wanted me to know that it's something that has to be given. I was like, okay, well,
Yeah.
so yeah.
It makes me wonder, and we don't have to talk about this today, but it makes me wonder about the kind of obligations that providers have because of insurance. To be like, did you check this box? And
Oh yeah,
you
I
know
do
what
wonder.
I,
I'm not
or
sure.
even like how things get coded. It opens up questions that I have. But bottom line, I'm really happy that you felt empowered and a sense of agency in terms of this is my decision, with my
Yeah.
husband and that
Yeah.
you didn't feel pressured.
Mm-mm.
Um, because I feel like if there was any pressure applied, that would just be so terrible. So,
Yeah, she did warn me that going up to Seattle Children's, it could come off as like kind of blunt.
mm,
There were some providers up there that might have had like more of a blunt opinion about it and to just
okay.
like go in recognizing, but they weren't. They were great, so it was fine.
Yeah, I personally in just in health situations when providers give you a heads up of like just so you know this tone or this language that might be
Yeah.
used with you, it's always just appreciated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So thank you for answering those
Yeah.
questions. Let's continue on with the pregnancy story.
So basically after the anatomy scan and then making those big decisions, we were just kind of taking it day by day, hoping that everything continued to look good. And at 24 weeks, it is medical protocol for twins that are mono twins, meaning they're sharing the placenta and the amniotic sac, that they go inpatient in the hospital, all twins all over the US and I think much of the world.
Hmm.
All pregnant moms with mono twins are
Hmm.
supposed to go into the hospital at 24 weeks to get daily non-stress tests. Which if you've never had a non-stress test, they like put these monitors on your belly and they look at the heart rate and the rhythm of the baby so that they can determine how well they're doing. And more importantly, they're looking at is the cord getting tangled up?
Hmm.
Or is there something happening with the placenta and their oxygen? And so basically, that was quite the feat. There was many days where I cried because I was just like, just find these freaking babies. Like people just had
Yeah.
such a hard time finding three separate heart rates or
Hmm.
heartbeats. And then I'd have to just lay there for an hour. Once they got them all in place, I had to lay there for an hour and just like track it. And so I advocated for not going in at 24 weeks and waiting till 26 so that I could spend more time with my daughter because she was not even 2 yet. And it was the first time I was going to be away from her for such long periods of time. And so I went in for daily non-stress tests at 20. And then once I hit 26 weeks, I went inpatient and which means I was in the hospital living there, was not allowed to leave, not at all, like not even allowed to go to like the coffee shop down the street. So once you're inpatient, you're inpatient. You're not like the only way you can leave is that you're being discharged. So it's a really weird insurance thing where like even though I technically wasn't on bed rest, I was not allowed to leave.
Hmm.
So then 3 times a day, I had these non-stress tests, and it was like such a long, almost 5 weeks of my life.
I can't
Um,
imagine.
I had so much stress of like missing my daughter and missing Connor, and I just cried a lot about that. And then just feeling like I was like kind of in jail
Yeah.
and what to do with my time. And, I was just like in this tiny little room. So the goal was for me to make it to 32 weeks. That's when they consider after that point, it starts to get a little bit more stressful for mono twins plus a triplet to all be sharing a space. I think if you didn't have the mono pregnancy, they will allow triplets to go much further. But at 30 weeks, I ended up going into spontaneous labor by myself. My body was like, nope, you're done. Your uterus is gonna it's calling quits.
Yeah.
And so we did everything. They gave me like different meds to try and stop labor, but it was not stopping. It was like we are going full force. So at that point, I think I was having contractions every 3 minutes for hours. It was just going. And the craziest part about it, which I'm glad I was in the hospital for this point, was that I couldn't feel them.
Really?
My stomach was so stretched out that the contractions felt like Braxton Hicks. They were not
No
painful.
way.
And with Luna, I had such intense, debilitating contractions, like brought me to my knees. I was like, are you sure I'm in labor? Like, this feels like just really tight. It felt like really tight, but not painful. And they were like, it's very steady contractions every 3 minutes for hours, and it just would not go away. So we had to make that call where I called my OB and I was like, hey, like, what are we going to do here? And she was like, okay, we could either do it now or we could do it as an emergency in the middle of the night. Which one do you want?
Yeah.
Like, let's do it now.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, just a little side note, which was kind of funny, was that there was a storm that day, and
Hmm.
St. Joe's Hospital normally, I think they told me they normally see like 12 to 14 deliveries a day. I don't know how correct that stat is,
Hmm.
but that's what I was told. And Leo, Mac, and Cruz were number 25, 26, and 27 of that
Oh my
day.
gosh.
Yeah, and they're like, this always happens when there's a storm. Babies just pop out with the pressure change. So,
Oh my gosh, that's really cool. I
yeah, I know. It
that
was really wild. There
yeah.
was people having babies all around me.
Oh my gosh, popular day to be born.
So then, fortunately, the C-section went really well. It was planned, non-emergent, so everything was nice and smooth. It actually ended up being like, besides the anxiety I felt of my body being numb from the waist down, everything went really, really nicely. And then, so the boys were born at 30 weeks and 4 days. Because they were so little and because my labor started so quickly, normally you would get steroid injections like 48 hours, I think, beforehand to help them develop their lungs, but I didn't have the chance for that. So they were a little bit more high risk even for being 30 weeks and 4 days. So unfortunately, it was one of those things where as soon as they were born, they were like just brought in front of my face and then kept going straight to the NICU,
Oh,
into the incubators to keep their temperatures regulated. They had CPAPs put on for respiratory. And yeah, that's where our NICU journey started.
yeah. So I'm just gonna pause this right there to highlight for listeners that that means that you did not you had your babies, but you were not able to hold them. You did not get the skin to skin.
Right,
You got to see them, but they were taken and immediately put in an intensive care unit.
right.
Okay. I just want to make sure
Yeah.
people really hear that you didn't get to hold your babies right away.
No, it was so hard.
Yeah, sorry. That is making me get teary-eyed. I'm sorry that
Yeah.
you didn't get to have that, and I know that that was life-saving for them to be able to
Yeah.
do that. But
Yeah.
I know that I don't know any moms who are like okay with not getting that, or not
No,
getting skin to
I'm
skin and holding them and looking them in their little faces.
right, right. I'm
Yeah.
usually the person that's like the least medical intervention possible. That's what I
Mm,
prefer.
yeah,
That's my usual go-to for everything. And so this was like such a 180. Yeah, it
totally.
was it was really hard. And I remember even the next day they were like, it had been I think 8 hours or 10 hours since I'd get given birth. And I was like, get me up there. I need to go to the NICU now. Like I need
Yeah.
to see them now. And they were like, well, we can't take you unless you're not gonna faint on us because of all the meds and everything from the C-section. When I would sit up, I'd get kind of dizzy. And
Uh-huh.
my OB would hate to hear this, but she was like, "How do you feel?" And I was like, "Great." And she was like, "Okay, you don't think you're gonna faint? You're not dizzy?" I'm like, "No, I'm fine." And they put me in the wheelchair and Connor's wheeling me down there, and I'm like, "I am going to pass out any second."
Hmm.
But I was like, I cannot go another minute not seeing my babies. Like, take
Yeah.
me there now. I'll tell you if I'm gonna faint. And I was fine. I made it. I didn't
Oh,
faint,
good job.
but there was a couple of moments there where I was like, this is I get why they're saying this, but also like I need to see them now. This is just
Yeah.
crazy. So yeah,
What did you
anyways.
even I don't mean to be like adding anything to your
No,
story, but
it's
was it
okay.
like, Connor, even if I pass out, you keep rolling, I'll come back.
I didn't say
I need
that,
to
but I'm sure
get
I was thinking
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Like, just
That
get me
just that's
there.
like that's the like the fierceness of your mama's love that I like sense talking to
Yeah.
you the first time on the phone, where I'm like, just keep my body in motion. I'm going to my
Yeah.
babies.
It
Yeah.
did make me a little mad that I was like, why couldn't they wheel me in my bed? Why couldn't they like lay me down and like let me, because it was about sitting up. The sitting up created this like blood pressure change and made me feel dizzy.
Yeah.
And so I was like, for moms that have to be separated from their babies because their babies are in the NICU, they should have the option to be wheeled up in their bed.
Yes.
So it just was really, that was kind of weird to me, but
Especially because, again, not a medical expert, but I feel like even as a layperson walking on planet Earth, we know that there is an instinct that moms like need and want to see their babies, like to know that their babies are
yeah,
okay. And that is just
yeah,
like part of how we have evolved. And it
it's
is how
primitive.
it is primitive. It is hardwired into us. And
Yeah.
so
I was like freaking out. Like, I need to see them now.
yeah, yeah. That, and I feel like that is again just like literally how we were made. It's how we keep our babies alive. Is like let me see them. And so
Right.
it's kind of perplexing and discouraging to me that it's not like, okay, how do we have the system built so that we make sure that moms are okay so they're able to go and see their babies as soon as possible,
Right.
even in an emergent situation like yours.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so I did end up going that day to the NICU, and then they're like, okay, there's three babies. Which one do you want to hold? And so I
Oh.
was like, okay. And because they were attached to so many different things, we had to be really mindful about holding them and how it could be, kind of challenging for them they were going to be outside of their incubators, so they'd have to be like skin to skin, warm on my chest, all these things. And so
Hmm.
I just kind of like, I was like, well, I'm closest to Mac. I'll hold Mac. So I held
Hmm.
Mac first. And then that day, I can't remember exactly what happened, but I feel like I needed to go lay down. Like I
Hmm.
wasn't feeling very good. And so
Yeah.
I went back to go lay down. And then it wasn't until I think the next morning when everything with Leo started and I hadn't held him yet. And I just remember
Oh.
this like feeling like, why didn't I hold him the first day? But I
Oh.
couldn't, like, they kind of told me I had to like pick and choose because they were so fragile and I was not feeling great. So, anyways,
Yeah.
that's where that all started. But I'll just finish real quick the story about Mac and Cruz and then we can get into Leo because I know we're
Yeah.
we're jumping around a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be great.
Okay. So Mac and Cruz had a really great NICU stay. I mean, if you can say any NICU stay is great, but
Mhm.
of course, like all the normal things like, oh, I miss them so deeply and I wanted them with me all the time. But thankfully they had no complications and they are what NICU providers would call just like feeders and growers. So they had no issues. They were just born early and they needed to learn how to grow and they needed to learn how to feed. So, like, I think by 33 weeks, they were off of their respiratory support, and I started breastfeeding.
Oh my gosh.
I started teaching them how to breastfeed. Um, and yeah, like it wasn't until about 34 weeks that they like sufficiently latched and got milk, but at 34 weeks, that was amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, so then
Oh.
they got all the way up to 38 weeks, just 2 weeks before their due date, and they both were taking enough volume of milk by mouth that they no longer needed their NG tubes, which are the tubes that help them get milk through their nose down to their belly. What most people don't realize is that like a suck reflex for infants comes in later. And so when babies are born at 30 weeks, they don't immediately have that suck reflex to know how to nurse or
Mm.
take in milk. So they have to get something like an NG tube to help sustain them into that point. So,
Mhm.
amazing things that the NICU has that even just like allows these babies to grow and thrive.
Yeah.
So at 38 weeks, both Mac and Cruz came home the same day, which was amazing. They were just growing like perfectly on par with each other. Um, and yeah, it was I think, let's see, gosh, I guess it was the beginning of July. And so they came home the beginning of July 2023. And then I had no idea that it was going to be a full year from that point, just under a year until Leo came home.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where Mac and Cruz's journey with the NICU ends, and I go all into Leo.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add on the Mac and Cruz NICU
I don't
journey?
think
You were
so.
you did a
They're
great job just offering.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I don't think so. It was really cute. Everyone just mentioned all the time how sweet it was that they like every milestone they hit together. And we
Oh.
got to this really beautiful place where every time I visited, I just would like tandem hold them. Um, yeah, and so I just held them both at the same time all the time, and except for when I was breastfeeding. And
Hmm.
yeah, it was good. And so,
Oh.
yeah, Leo's journey was definitely different.
Hmm.
Let's see, day 2 of life, they woke
Hmm.
up and they said, okay, Leo has not passed any stool yet, and that's concern for an intestinal blockage, and they needed him to get imaging. So they sent him up to Seattle Children's to get imaging. And I remember like just crying that day, thinking like, you guys are separating my babies. You're separating my babies. This is insanity. Like, how
Yeah.
am I gonna like take care of my daughter at home, go to the NICU at St. Joe's, and then go up to Seattle Children's to that NICU? And I remember the doctor there being like, it's just for safety. We need to make sure he's okay. Like, best case scenario, he's home on Monday or he's back here Monday. And just like, oh, it was so crazy how that was just so far from the truth. But she was trying to help me and that's fine.
Hmm.
So then he takes like emergency transport up to Seattle Children's and then they did a scan and recognized he did have a block. And within a couple hours, he went into an emergency operation. to help open up that part of his intestines and clear the block. So because he had had challenging anatomy scan in utero, we knew that his heart was somewhat shifted. And so we knew that like as soon as he was born and stable and able, we were going to do a scan, like a more intensive imaging to see what else was going on. So after he had that surgery, they decided during the surgery he had a ventilator put in and they were able to do a CT scan. I'll always remember the people calling us and they basically told us like these results are very ominous.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, and this is oops, I'm sorry, my alarm's going off. And they said basically they were too scared. Even though he was born with the CPAP, they were too scared to take the ventilator out after they saw what the results were. And so we had lots of discussions that, you know, he basically like his heart was fine, but he had some congenital abnormalities within his intestines, his lung, and his esophagus. And it would need a really big major airway surgery that he needed to be a certain weight for in order to even handle it.
Mm.
So this is kind of where we go into, I like to piece apart like our journey in the NICU and well in the ICU in general, just like over three different portions. And
Okay.
this is the part where we're like in our early NICU stay.
Okay.
So he got placed with the ventilator after this major surgery. And at that point, we're just told we need to wait while he grows. So we don't know how long that's going to be. He just needs to keep growing, and then we'll be able to do the major airway surgery, and then he can come home after that. And so that first month was so challenging. I didn't get to hold him until he was 7 days old for the first
Mm.
time. And that was when he was finally the most stable that he could be like taken out of his incubator. And then after like a couple weeks, he started going into respiratory distress. And this is where we started to recognize like something wasn't right with his ventilator. We had found that he has something called complete tracheal rings, which basically just means that part of his trachea, which is his airway, his windpipe, part of his airway was not flexible. And so as he grew, it did not grow and it was extremely narrow. So over time, what would happen is that this ventilator tube would get pushed down a little bit too far, and it would cause swelling in his airway and then block his airway. And so we went through some really, really challenging respiratory failure episodes where I was unable to hold him. That first month, I think I held him like a couple times after 7 days old. And then I just remember the very first time that I came in here and there's a doctor sitting on the chair and she's got her head in her hands, just like stressed out. You can tell the stress on her face. And she
Yeah.
was just like, yeah, Leo's having a tough time today. We're trying to figure out why he's going into respiratory failure. And they didn't know. And so over the course of the next 4.5 weeks of him having the vent in and us not being able to hold him, we went through really challenging like roller coaster episodes where he was placed on paralytics and major sedatives. I think one of the like things that stands out to me the most that I remember is like just walking into the room and like this is gonna make me teary. Walking into the room and he's like completely asleep and he had been for a while, but that there was like signs all over the room being like no bath, no transfers, no moving him without two people, like basically like don't touch this baby because if we touch him, then that vent tube could cause swelling and he could die. And so we got to a point where this was the first discussion I had of like what to do if he begins to die. If he goes into such intense respiratory failure that we can't revive him. I remember that there's this doctor that came into the room and sat down. There was two of them, and she sat down with me and she said, basically, we've talked to all our options. Like the first option would be go right into that major airway surgery that we're talking about, and we decided that he's too small for that. He wouldn't survive it. And the second option would be to put him on ECMO life support, which I think you were going to share what the definition of that was, but I could just briefly kind of say on my end what
Yeah, go for
it's
it.
from my understanding, it's called extracorporeal membrane support. And
Mhm.
Basically, it's life support where all the blood is pumped out of your body into a machine where it gets oxygenated and then gets pumped back into your body. And that just makes it so that your lungs don't have to do any of the oxygenating work. And so for someone like Leo, where he was going into respiratory failure, that would have been like a life-saving option for him at the time. But then they told me his veins were too small. So
Oh.
he was just too tiny. And I forgot what I didn't mention before is when they were born, Leo was only 2 pounds, 14 ounces. So he was really, really tiny. They were tall, but they were really skinny. And Mac and Cruz were 3 pounds, 10 ounces and 3 pounds, 8 ounces. So they were quite a bit bigger than him. Anyways, that first discussion, they basically told me if we get into this scenario where we can't reverse this, like there's nothing we can do. And I just remember being so mad, like just being like, you're telling me that if this wasn't your kid, that you would do whatever you could to save them, you would just let
Hmm.
them die. And yeah, just that anger of that day. And I think that's where like my like mama bear really started to come out, where I was just
Hmm.
like, we need to do something else. This is not working,
Hmm.
and we can't just sit with this ventilator coming in and out and causing issues until he has his major airway surgery. So this was Connor and my like first indicator that like, okay, we need to follow our intuition. He was born with CPAP. He handled CPAP, get the vent out. And
Hmm.
so we went through lots of discussions where people were so scared to take it out. And I was like, he's not thriving with it in. What else are we going to do? So just to kind of like pull together the last little bit of the like first part of my the NICU stay, one really like traumatic scenario for me that I think I don't know if how many other mamas out there have experienced this. It's extremely challenging to witness. We had a first time where they tried to pull the ventilator out, which they call extubation, and whoever had like cleared his nose didn't clear it fully. And so, like, a mucus plug shot into the tiny little part of his airway, which was only 1.9 millimeters, just super
Oh my
tiny.
gosh.
A mucus plug shot into that, and he began to code. And, like, the code button was pressed, 20 people rushed into the room, and they began CPR. And I just will always remember what it was like, just like standing on the outskirts of the room, watching like a flood of people come in. And then, like, even hearing the beeps, I can hear the beeps as his heart
Hmm.
rate started to slow down. And, like, as people were calling out, it's been 5 minutes with his heart rate under this rate. It's been 6 minutes, and just going, going, and how, like, traumatic of a situation that was.
Hmm.
So, fortunately, they were able to emergency reintubate him and recognize, oh, it was just a mucus plug. That's the only reason. It wasn't because he couldn't tolerate it or whatever. It's just his airway's too tiny, which we need to fix. And so thankfully they were still aware that he could handle it. And the next week they were able to take it out, and he made it without a ventilator all the way up until his next major surgery. So yeah, it was a really, really challenging time for me. And one thing that I wanted to touch on that I told you about is kind of like navigating. This is Leo's story, and then like my story during it.
Hmm.
And,
Yeah.
that whole first period, I was feeling like navigating postpartum was so challenging. Shifting between, like I mentioned before, so many places with my 2-year-old at home, at St. Joe's with Mac and Cruz, then driving up to Leo. I was dealing with pumping every 2 to 3 hours, waking up in the middle of the night for Mac and Cruz, bottle feeding, breastfeeding, and like waking up and starting my whole day over again.
Uh,
And it was just insanity. And, I was grateful that I was like able to make enough milk. So I really didn't want to stop doing that because I
mhm.
thought it was so crucial for all my babies to get it if they could.
Yeah.
But yeah, just the lack of sleep and like the challenge. I don't even know how I did it looking back on it now. I'm like, that was pure insanity.
Yeah, that's the strength of a mama's love. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, it
Uh,
was crazy.
this might be a little, I was gonna say semantical. That's the wrong word. I'm Walk us through the amount of time this commute is taking you. Home,
Yeah.
St. Joe's, Seattle Children's,
Yeah.
like, because so all those things that you said plus that time.
Yeah, it was challenging. And, anyone that has had multiple kids with one of them in the NICU knows how challenging it is to like navigate your time between all of them. And so one of the things that I always say is that like I didn't do this alone, and
Mm.
I also did not see all the kids every single day because it was impossible. If I wanted to like be home for Luna at all, I had to some days choose, okay, today I'm going to see Mac and Cruz and my mom is going to see Leo. Or today I'm going to see Leo and Connor's going to see Mac and Cruz, or things like
Yeah.
that, because it just was impossible to see them all. And so I'll always say I'm so incredibly grateful for my mom and my two sisters, Pearl and Christine, because any day that I was not with Leo, I'm not kidding, like every single day for 13 months straight, one of them would go. And it was sometimes we would double duty. I was there in the morning, someone was there in the evening, because there was just no way that I could have done it all. So, yeah, so I'd wake up like at 5 a.m. in the morning and pump, and then bottle feed Mac and Cruz, or I mean, no, Mac and Cruz were not home yet. I'd wake up, pump, I'd go to the NICU, I would hold them, I'd try to breastfeed them, I'd bottle feed them. And then, like, at that point, I can't remember if Connor was taking Luna to school or no, Luna wasn't in school yet. She was home. So then we were navigating, like, okay, Connor's at work and I'm going to these NICUs. And what do we do with Luna? She had just turned
Yeah.
2. So we were like, having different grandmas and nannies and people coming in to watch her. And at one point, my sister literally came home early from like a year-long travel around the world to watch Luna for me.
Yeah.
And so I would go to St. Joe's and I'd be there all morning, and then I'd drive up to Seattle Children's and I'd be there all afternoon, and then I'd come home in time to put Luna to bed most
Hmm.
of the time, unless there was a really tough day for Leo. Then a lot of times I couldn't do that, and Connor would end up navigating multiple. And then by the time Mac and Cruz came home, then Connor really had his hands full because every time I'd go up to see Leo, he was navigating newborn twins and Luna by himself. And so he would usually go up to Seattle Children's on the weekend, but couldn't
Hmm.
during the week because of work. So yeah, it was really, really hard. I think any new NICU mom will tell you like what a hormone roller coaster it feels like when normally like all of your hormones are abated by like being able to snuggle your newborn, breastfeed your newborn, sleep with your newborn, do all those things. But instead, when your kid's in the NICU, you're having to like ask your nurse to like, hey, can I hold my baby? Like, help me hold my baby. The first time I held Leo, it took over 10 minutes to get him into my lap because of how many cords he had. And
Oh.
so it was so challenging. And so one person was holding his vent tube, the other person's carrying him, and there's like all these cords coming. I just remember it was like such a mess. They were all tangled up between each other. And then the constant guilt that you feel of like, not being with one of them. Like I was always feeling like, oh my gosh, I was just in the hospital for almost 5 weeks and Luna misses me so much and I'm not seeing her all day. Or like Leo going through like some major challenges and being like having the doctors have to call me and tell me what's going on with him because I wasn't with him. So it was so
Yeah.
challenging. And then also no one talks about like enough at least about how when you have newborn babies and your first baby is no longer a baby, it's just it like makes me emotional even saying that.
Yeah.
Just like watching Luna like suddenly become this big kid and like feeling like I was so busy that I was missing it. It was so hard.
Yeah. I've I have heard other moms talk about that in the
Yeah.
complications and like multifacetedness of your story aside, where it's like, oh my goodness, where did this big girl come from? I'm so happy that
Yeah.
she's growing up, but also wait, this was just my baby.
Right.
Time slowed down, where it's
Right.
there's grief there, like a
There's so
specific kind
much
of
grief.
grief. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
much grief of like mourning her babyhood.
Yeah.
And then also just like wishing that I could be there for every minute of it because she was changing so fast.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was really challenging, but we made it through that period. Mac and Cruz came home and I was so grateful to have them home. And of course it was really challenging because then they're up all night and then I'm still trying to like get Luna at that point Luna started school, and then there was this period and I wish I recorded it. Like I definitely didn't have the energy nor the time to record it, but I wish just one time I had recorded what it looked like, what a morning looked like for me, because I didn't have any like nannies at the time or anyone to help me. And I had my mom and my mother-in-law coming in, but my mornings looked like this. Connor would get up and go to work. I would get Luna up, get her ready for school. I'd get the boys up, feed them bottles. I'd pack everybody's lunch, all the bottles, a cooler full of like pumps, bottles, breast milk. I'd have like a backpack of like change of clothes, diapers. I would load everyone into the car with this giant wagon that I put Mac and Cruz in. I would drive Luna to school, drop her off, drive an hour and a half to get to Seattle Children's, load Mac and Cruz into my wagon, and everyone always knew, oh, there's like the triplet mom coming in because I'd be coming into the NICU with my wagon full of babies, and I would stay there all the way up until I had to leave just before traffic, get home in time to pick Luna up from school, and then finally get home, have Luna, Mac, and Cruz, and then Connor would get home from work. And it took us a while to finally realize you need to change your schedule. This is too much for me.
Yeah, a
But
lot.
it was chaos. It was just insanity. And I can't even like tell you how much stuff I had. I like was like piling things on my back into the wagon, into all the stuff. So we did that for all the way through till December. He did have like one other surgery in between there for his intestines, and they placed a G tube, which if there are any mamas listening to this that their babies have G tubes, it's a big learning curve, like learning to feed your baby through a G tube instead of by mouth. So there's a lot that goes into that, but he had a G tube placed, and then finally, he was big enough in December, which took a really long time from May to December to get him to be big enough for this major airway surgery.
Mm.
And so this was probably like one of the most traumatic parts of our journey. He struggled with weight gain issues up until that point, so that's why it took so long. And then finally, when he had the major airway surgery, they completed something called a slide tracheoplasty, which is essentially a tracheal reconstruction or an airway reconstruction. In order to do that, they have to completely crack open his chest. So it's open-hearted cardiac bypass. They have to put his heart on cardiac bypass in order to like slightly shift it out of the way. When the blood is being pumped out of it, it's more flexible, so they can slightly like pull and move it a little bit and get to all the areas that they need to get to. So he had multiple different congenital abnormalities fixed during the surgery. I think they took him, I remember him leaving like 7 a.m. in the morning, and we didn't have a doctor come back into the room to like tell us how it all went until 7 p.m. So it was a really, really long surgery. I think he had like a general surgeon, a GI doctor, an ENT, a cardiothoracic surgeon, all working at the same time, like throughout the day, working on him. And he had a couple like
Wow.
big episodes, what they called pericode episodes, where they had to like revive him a little bit during the surgery because it was so much on his little body.
Yeah.
And then he came out of it, and everyone's like, okay, he did it. We're going to get through it. Now he just needs to recover, which we were expecting to be about 1 to 2 months of recovery because it was such a big surgery. Um, but by day two, he started to do really poorly.
Mm.
And they recognized that, okay, this is not working. His body was getting so incredibly swollen, like he looked like a marshmallow. He was so
Oh.
swollen that he stopped peeing, and he couldn't breathe well. Like all the swelling was pushing on his lungs. So they ended up having to, at this point, actually put him on ECMO life support. And ECMO life support can be really dangerous because all the blood is being shifted out of the body into the machine and back in, the chance of it clotting, getting blood clots is really high. And if you know anything about blood clots, the biggest risk is that a blood clot will break off and like go to the brain or go to the heart or lungs and kill you. So there are like the biggest, I don't know the statistics. I've heard something as high as like even half of babies. I don't know if that's true, but like don't come off of ECMO. They end up passing away. So it's just really scary. And so he was on that for 12 days where he had to be highly sedated, couldn't move. There was a couple times he cracked his eyes open, but he basically was just, we were just trying to let his body recover and heal while allowing the life support to like oxygenate his blood. So, yeah, it was a really, really challenging period, and it happened to be over Christmas and New Year's.
My gosh.
And
Yeah.
so, just on my end of things, like navigating like so much grief that like my baby's on ECMO,
Yeah.
while we're having like the holidays and trying to be there for my other kids. So it was really, really hard.
That is really hard. I feel like we've had a couple other guests actually who have had different life experiences, but where it hit during the holidays. So one guest
Yeah.
who her mom got stage 4 cancer diagnosis during the holidays. Another
hmm
friend who guest of the podcast who lost a very close immediate family member like right as the holidays were hitting. And it's just
Yeah.
it's this time of year where joy and merry and all of these
Right.
signals to us of be happy, be festive, be cheerful, when it's like my heart's actually breaking right now. And I feel like
Right.
I've just witnessed other people feel even more isolated in their pain because of that contrast. So I'm not sure if that speaks to you and your experience too.
Yeah, in some ways, I
Mhm.
think, it was so, so hard to have my kids split up. And
Mhm.
I also felt like I'm so grateful that I have like these
Right.
other healthy babies right here that can like take me out of this for a moment and
Right.
allow me to feel some joy during this time. And I remember feeling like at times like feeling guilty even that I was like finding joy in some of those moments because I was like, but Leo's like on his like deathbed right now.
Yeah.
But then like I took Luna to go see Snowflake Lane in Bellevue, and at
Oh.
that age, she thinks that the reindeer Rudolph was real. She was like, she thought he was real, and the look on her face, I will never forget it. She was so stoked, like that's Rudolph. It was so cute. And I just remember thinking like, oh, this is hard and also what a blessing that like I
Mm.
can I can feel multiple things at once, like the duality of grief and joy, being able to
Yeah.
like feel them both at once and that's allowed, like it's okay. Like the body's amazing that sometimes it can compartmentalize like that and allow it to be. But yeah, it was extremely challenging. I like spent Christmas morning with my family and Christmas evening in the hospital watching Leo get a bronchoscopy. Like,
Oh.
yeah, it was hard. And, we had the most amazing surgeon, praise him forever, because he came on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, like all these days that he was actually off work. He was not supposed to be at the hospital. He was coming in because he cared so much about Leo and he was checking on Leo and scoping Leo. And Leo had so many bronchs during that time because he wasn't doing well that we had to figure out what was going on. So, yeah, it was incredibly stressful. And I just remember, like, while he was on ECMO life support and so sedated, and really wasn't opening his eyes very much, like, my family and we would just come and like hold his hand and rub his head and sing to him and read him books. And I sang Somewhere Over the Rainbow to him for months before that, but I just kept singing it over and over when he was on life support because I knew he could hear me.
Oh.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And then when he finally came out of it, my mom caught this beautiful video of him where they took the life support off and he like they started to let him like come out of the sedation. And I was like singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow to him and he was just staring at me with like these big eyes, just like, oh my goodness, like I know you.
Oh. Oh. Yeah. He recognized his mama's voice. He was like,
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
that voice. You're my mom."
And I'll just cherish that video forever because you could see like he's like got this like fresh giant scar down his chest and it's like still scabbed, and his arms like we couldn't let them be free because he'd pull his vent out and there was like all these things and he's just staring at me like with tears in his eyes almost like, "Hi, mama."
Hi, Mama. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
So,
I'm glad your mom was
anyways,
able to get that video too.
yeah.
And I just think how special that song will be to you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, so it's still a song I sing to all my kids every night before they go to bed.
Oh, that's
Um,
beautiful.
yeah, it's really, really, it's great. It's a special song to us. So,
Hmm.
So, we kind of just to kind of jump back into where we were
Mm-hmm.
at,
Yeah.
I recognize this is a really long episode and there's so many things involved with it. So please tell me if it's like, okay, what else can we move on from here?
No,
But
you're doing great. I love the direction you're taking things. I'm okay with it being a long episode because there's a lot we want to cover and it's all
okay.
important. I am it doesn't have to be right now, but I would love to hear at some point like how are you eating? Like is somebody bringing you food? I know it's like silly,
That
but
is a really good
I'm
question.
like, girl, I'm hungry just thinking about all the like you're pumping and you're breastfeeding and you're driving and you're
Yeah.
doing all this stuff. Your brain is so active. How are you? Is somebody feeding you? What's going on?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Seattle Children's had this amazing plan set in place that as long as you were giving your baby in the NICU like the bulk amount of their food nutrition, which he was getting 100% of my breast milk and some what they call TPN, but like and he was not getting any formula. He was getting all breast milk.
Wow.
Because he was getting all breast milk, I was allowed 3 meals a day from the hospital. And most hospitals, like I was at St. Joe's for 5 weeks and their food was not good. Most hospitals, the food are not good, but Seattle
Yeah.
Children's does a really good job with their room service food. Like they had all different kinds of options and I'm gluten free and they had tons of gluten free options. And so I really did just like order all my meals there. And it was great. I
Good.
mean, they had
Yeah.
everything, pizza, pasta, salads, different kinds of lifestyle bowls, like breakfast, desserts, yeah, everything you can think of. So it
Oh,
was,
I'm glad it
I
was good. You
I
had
would have
access to it and
never,
it was good.
it was good. I mean, it wasn't like, gourmet, but it was pretty good. And I think I would have like, yeah,
Hmm.
shriveled up and died if I didn't have the food because there was no I was coming home and not cooking. And we also had so many amazing people bring us food. Like I
Good.
had so many friends and family bring us food. So many people give us like Uber Eats gift cards or DoorDash gift cards. Some people were extremely generous with their gift cards and so we lived off of all that. Like sometimes people would bring us like 3 meals at a time and we would just like freeze some of them so there was a good long period there where I hardly cooked at all because I just didn't have the capacity to. And so
Yeah.
we really thrived off of those. And for anyone that knows someone going through a NICU journey, like food is the thing to
Hmm.
give. It really is so helpful.
Hmm.
So yeah.
That's a good shout out. So if you know a family who is going through a journey that has even like part of the facets of Rosie's family,
Yeah. Even a 5-day NICU journey,
yeah,
whatever.
like meal train or some other way to make sure that people are getting fed so that
Yeah.
the family doesn't have to think about it.
Yeah. Because you just
Yeah.
won't eat. Or you'll just eat really crappy. And that's just not like I like to eat healthy. So it was really
Hmm.
nice to have that option.
Hmm. Were you able to
Um,
do anything to take care of yourself? I mean, it's your schedule was packed end to end. You're not sleeping very much. But was there anything that you were able to do for you in this point, or it
yeah.
sounds very survival mode.
It was definitely survival mode.
Yeah,
For the
okay.
first time in my life, like I normally work out a lot and do a lot of self-care type of things for myself. And it was like the first time in probably, I don't know, since high school where I like stopped working out. I didn't have time or capacity to do anything like that. But there were a couple things I did do. I did work with a cognitive behavioral coach that did some coaching sessions with me throughout my journey, like when I would have like pretty traumatic episodes, our sessions looked like it would kind of be like a therapy session for the first 30 minutes. And then the second 30 minutes, she would take me through a guided meditation based on what like my emotions and experiences I was feeling, and then what I also wanted to feel. So it was really nice because I could be like, I'm feeling like such deep sadness or grief or anxiety or fear, lots of fear, and then helping me imagine and shift into what it feels like to feel peace and what it feels like to find ease in my body. And so I was doing some of that. And then I did do some meditation on my own and really just like walks, but that's it. I didn't
Hmm.
hardly do any yoga. I didn't hardly do any working out or, yeah.
And to be clear, the question is not from like me thinking or anybody thinking that you should be doing
Oh,
anything other
yeah.
than what
Just
exactly you
wondering.
were doing.
Yeah, that's okay.
It just sounds like you were so living for your children and needing
Absolutely
so
the
much
most
support from your community.
self-sacrifice.
And with the coach, which that sounds great. I'm so glad you had access to that resource. Was that something that you had to seek out, or did somebody at Children's or St. Joe's?
I had this amazing experience where one of our one of one of our family friends actually asked me if it was something I would be interested in. And I said, yeah, I'm interested in that because she knows that I love the woo woo, I love the spiritual, I'm into all of that.
Same. Yes,
And
100%.
and she's like, it's a little different, you know. And so, anyways, she gifted it to me, which was like one of the most wonderful gifts I could have imagined. Because it's not cheap, it's very expensive. But I ended up using this person through like some major transitional episodes during my journey. And, I didn't do like what you would consider normal therapy until after. So this was like a very helpful thing for me to have during.
I'm so
Yeah.
glad. What
Yeah.
a beautiful gift.
Yeah, it
And
was.
I think it's also a good reminder to all of us that as members of the community, I feel like a go-to when somebody has a baby, NICU or not, bring a meal, bring a hot plate,
Yeah, there's so many
like
things you can
help
do.
out, but it doesn't have to look like that. It can be
It
gifting
can be
somebody therapeutic
self-care.
support. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, if someone like gifts a massage or,
Ooh,
those are
yeah.
wonderful things to give
Mm-hmm.
a
Yeah,
new mom. So,
absolutely.
yeah, anyways, so that
Yeah.
was a good one.
Awesome. Rosie, let's take a quick break and
Yep.
then we'll be right back.
Okay.
Rosie and I are back from our little break, and we were just talking about how she navigated a very medically complex situation with her son, Leo, who was at Seattle Children's Hospital through the holiday season of December 2022 into January 2023. Um, Rosie, talk to us about this shift and what happened at this time where you kind of had to double down and get even more fierce as the advocate mama that you are.
Yeah. So with any NICU journey, they have something called rounds in the morning where all the teams and specialists come around and they come stand in front of the room and they talk about the plan for the day. And so I was always known as one of the people that really wanted to be on rounds. If I was in person, I would do it, but if I wasn't in person, I really would like to be called. And that's because I considered myself and many others considered me like such a primary care provider for Leo during that
Yeah.
time. And this is important for me to think about too, because it was a time in my life where like I definitely felt myself moving into like a fight or flight state where
Yes.
where I had to be so on all the time that if I wasn't on, something might go wrong. And so the shift in my nervous system carried for a long time. And I have to like point that out because it's something I'll talk about at the end. But during this
Yeah.
period, it was like Leo was having he came off ECMO life support just to kind of wrap it back to that time. He came off ECMO life support and we were all so happy and he was doing so well for 2 days. And then 2 days after the 2 days go by, he starts to go into respiratory failure again. And the feeling that you get being a NICU mom and getting a middle of the night phone call is like one of the worst feelings you'll ever experience. Just knowing I actually somehow my phone ended up on vibrate and I didn't hear the call. And I
Mm-hmm.
wake up like not too long after, maybe 30 minutes after they called me, and I had four missed calls from Seattle
Oh my
Children's.
gosh.
And I just was freaking out. So then I call them back and they say, "Hey, Rosie, it's not looking good. You need to get up here." And so I immediately grabbed all my stuff, got in the car, went straight up there, and the whole way up, just thinking, like, what's going to happen, you know? And they were talking about putting him back on ECMO life support. but that he wasn't a good candidate for it anymore. So then they might have to do open-hearted ECMO. And thankfully, we never got to that point, but we dealt with really intense malasial episodes, which basically just means that parts of his airway were collapsing on itself, and then he would not be able to breathe. And so we went through like 5 weeks of just really intense every other day, him going into extreme respiratory distress, multiple times the code button being pressed, which is just so traumatic to witness. So many people rushing in and thinking, oh my gosh, is this it? Is today going to be the day? That he doesn't make it. And so, yeah, it was just so many bronchs, so many, he had multiple CT scans. He had a CT scan of his brain, an EEG of his brain, because I started getting concerned that all the sedation was like causing actual brain damage, or that like
Right.
he had brain damage and we didn't know because he was asleep. There was just so much traumatic stuff going on there. And we finally realized that he was putting himself into these episodes because he would get mad. He would like start to come out of the sedation and he'd get mad that he had a ventilator in his mouth. And the first thing he would try to do is pull it out, or he would just thrash his head back and forth and he'd get so mad. And then everything around his like airway and his neck and his chest would clamp down, and then it would swell. And the
Oh.
swelling would make it so that he'd go into this respiratory distress, and then they would like sedate him to try to get him to calm down and for him to open back up. And so finally, after 5 weeks, I came up to one of the ENT doctors and I was like, this has got to stop. And there were multiple doctors questioning the treatment, being like, what are we going to do next? What's the plan here? And
Mm-hmm.
so I ended up calling a care conference, which I did many times throughout my journey there. I'm sure people were like, this mom is woof, but that's what you got to do. And I was like, they would try to schedule them and one specialist would be missing. And I said, no, we are not doing these care conferences unless everyone is there, because they all need to have a say in what is happening here. And we're talking like life or death situations for my son.
Right.
So, I would come in with a list of questions that I would email to the providers before so they knew what I was going to be asking about, and just lead the conference. Like, this is next. What's next? What's our other options? And I just remember feeling like this is terrifying. And I'm suddenly finding this like really intense power in my voice that I never had before. And I was
Yeah.
feeling really confident that, like, I knew Leo's journey best. I knew him better than anyone else in this room. So, whenever they would come up with certain treatment plans, many of them got to a point where they'd be like, and what do you think, Rosie? Like, is this going to be a
Mm-hmm.
good plan for Leo? And I so
Mm-hmm.
appreciated that because they just knew that I knew him. And so finally, we got to that point where I was like, the vet needs to come out. This is not working. And people were so scared because he was surviving through this vent, but I was
Mm-hmm.
like, he
Yeah.
won't have these episodes if we take the vent out. And so we got to this really place where I sat down with the doctor and I was like, I am ready to pull it and emergency reintubate if it doesn't work out. And I just remember the look on his face, and he literally looked at me and said, wow, I can really see where you're at now. You are over this. And I'm like, I'm over it for him. I'm over
Yeah.
this for him. He
Yes.
needs to live. He has been sleeping for the past 2 months. He had just
Mm-hmm.
been like asleep through his life.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really a challenging period, but it was a huge wake-up call for everyone because they extubated him and he thrived. He, that's all he wanted, was to get it out. He stopped getting
Wow.
mad. Every time he got mad, I immediately was able to pick him up and hold him. And I just remember this one doctor coming in and being like, wow, Leo really loves to be held. And I was like, he wasn't held for 5 weeks straight because of the stupid vent. And now we're recognizing every time he's about to have an episode, if I just pick him up and rock him, or you pick him up and rock him, or anyone in the room shows him love and physical touch, he immediately calms down and he doesn't spiral. And so then it became this well-known thing, like Leo's the snuggly baby. Like if you have a free moment in your day, go hold Leo. For a month straight, as we're like getting him through these really challenging episodes and periods, we would have conversations about, okay, Rosie's not going to be here from 1 to 3. Who's going to hold Leo? And so like doctors would be on their breaks and they'd come in and hold Leo. Or it was just he
Oh.
was held nonstop for a month straight, even like sometimes in the middle of the night, because it's what got him through that really intense period. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, it was a huge wake up call to be like, wow, turns out babies just really need physical touch. Like,
Yeah.
it's not rocket science, but when it comes down to it, we were talking about doing other surgeries to get him through this. And I was like,
Mhm.
no, he just wants to be held.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was a huge wake up call for so many
Mhm.
people just seeing that, like, my goodness, like sometimes less is more. And for
Yeah.
Leo, more often than not, we found that less was more. There was so
Mhm.
many treatment options where that happened. And it wouldn't have happened unless I was consistently being like, no, we need less. We
Mhm.
need less. And so while I'm so grateful for the life-saving support and equipment and expertise of the NICU. Like none of the three of my babies would have survived without it. Leo wouldn't have survived if I didn't advocate for him like this. And
Right.
that's like such a challenging thing to realize, but to also feel like, okay, there's such power in like a mama's intuition and her connection to her baby. A
Yes.
mama knows her baby best. Like
Right.
your baby can't talk, you are your baby's voice. And so whatever intuition it is that you're feeling, there's a reason. It's
Mhm.
because they are telling you something and you are their voice. And so finally realizing that was so huge because it was like, okay, anything Leo wants, he gets. Yeah,
Well,
go
what
ahead.
I appreciate too, your mama's intuition is ascribing an emotion to his
Yeah,
reaction. It's
yeah,
not just, well, he's uncomfortable because he's coming out of sedation. It's he is angry. He is having this reaction out of anger. And I feel like that's
yeah,
not something that you would necessarily see medically, where it's like, patient is angry, therefore doing this. It would be attributed to something else. But mama's
right.
intuition is saying this is an emotional response. And we look how it all played out. And it's like, yes. And look at how he's responding to care and being held and being
Yes,
touched. He's being soothed like
he's being soothed.
babies are meant to be soothed by
Right.
other by adults, by other people in their
Yeah.
community. And I think, not to wax too poetically here, but as you were talking about people and I'm going to try not to get too emotional, as you're talking about people holding Leo and how it was just arms surrounding him over and over and over. I'm just thinking about how your community did that with you too, where your family you were just held, and you did. I know how much I don't want to in any way take away from how hyper and
No, it's
amazingly
okay.
independent
Oh
you
no, I
were,
could not have
but
done this.
I'm just seeing like all this like beautiful humanity where you're holding Leo and you're being held by your
Yeah,
community, and like
absolutely.
that's what we're supposed to do for one another when families go through stuff like what your family went through.
Absolutely. And I'm so grateful to say I had so many people that did that for me, my
Yeah.
family. I had my girlfriends. It's like a side chat that every time I needed to rant and vent, I'd just be like, this happened and I'm just
Yeah.
losing it.
Yeah.
And they were there. And then I had, the V community that like just stepped in and were like, we'd love to support you. And even then at the time I was like, I don't deserve this. Why do I deserve this? Like this is
Yeah. Who, me?
so, yeah, like I can't receive this. This is too much. And just then kind of recognizing and leaning into like people want to help. People
Yeah.
want to help and I need the help.
Mm.
Like I need to set my humility aside and just like recognize like, okay, this is what I need to get through this right now.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
it was a beautiful thing to start to see and understand.
Hmm.
It was also during this period that I learned that we had like tens of thousands of people praying for Leo. And
Oh.
I didn't know that initially. Like I've always been very verbal and I'm the friend that like I am emotional, I'm in my feels, I'm vulnerable. I talk about how I'm
Yeah.
feeling and I
Hmm.
share a lot. And so through this journey, I found one thing that like really helped me was also just updating people on my Instagram because I actually I had so many people that would text me and like, how's Leo doing? What's going on? And it was almost too overwhelming to respond to like so many different texts that,
Hmm.
but besides like my family and like my closest friends, I would just be like, I will update on Instagram when I'm there.
Yes, yes.
And it was helpful because I just updated once, and
Hmm.
if people wanted to support through that, they could. And then suddenly I had like all these new people following Leo's story, and then all these people saying they told their moms and their moms told their churches, and then these different churches all had like churches across the country praying for Leo.
Oh my
And
goodness.
and we just heard like multiple times that like, wow, like from the doctors, like, I can't believe he made it through this day. I can't believe he made it through another thing. Like he's such a miracle. And I'm like, yeah, because he has literally like
Hmm.
thousands and thousands of people praying for him nonstop. Yeah, it
That's
makes me
so
emotional
beautiful.
saying it, but
That
I've
is
never,
so beautiful.
I mean, and even people that like never prayed in their lives, So
Hmm.
it was
Yeah.
it was really, really beautiful to witness that and recognize like, okay, like sometimes things like this is what brings someone back to spirituality
Hmm.
um and
And
there's
it,
beauty in that.
and I feel like what's coming to mind for me too is you have this tiny, 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 helpless little medically fragile baby wielding such power, where people
Such
are
power.
tapping into something bigger than themselves, participating in prayer or connection or spirituality or whatever kind of connection is helping them feel like they are advocating for him, something they might not be able to see.
Yeah,
I'm like, that is power right there.
absolutely. And I have my mom has said that, and I have felt that multiple times, like Leo actually taught a lot of people how to pray.
Oh
Like
my God.
they never did before, and they just care
Yeah.
so much about us and him that they did. And so,
That's good job, Leo.
yeah.
Little
So,
fighter.
yeah. So anyways,
Yeah.
it was a challenging journey to get through,
Hmm.
and I can shift into our next portion if you want,
Yeah,
the
let's
last
do
part of our
that.
little stay.
Yeah. So, do you mind just putting a timestamp on the front of that? So, it
Yeah.
sounds like January, February is when this ups this you start advocating and he's the tube's taken out. He's no
Yeah.
longer on the
Right.
ventilator. Okay.
Yep. So now we're in February and
Okay.
they're like, okay, he's thriving. Things are looking good. They started talking about transitioning him to the floor, which means he's going to be coming home soon. And so we were really getting prepared to like bring him home.
Hmm.
Then he started to lose weight. And so it just felt like it was just an unending emotional roller coaster. It was like one
Yeah.
thing after another after another.
Hmm.
And so we started to try to figure out, why is he losing weight? Why can't he gain weight? He's getting a ton of calories. Like all these, I mean, they were feeding him like way more breast milk than Mac and Cruz were taking. And so it was just, yeah, it was really surprising. And so he started to lose some weight, and then we got into a really challenging place where he ended up going into septic shock, and they realized that like there was something happening within his intestines that were causing him to like go into septic shock, and that was another like kind of big experience in our journey, just recognizing like, okay, we got through all of this and we were almost home, and now we're just hit with another hurdle,
Hmm.
another big thing where he might die. After getting through all of that,
Hmm.
his
Hmm.
organs, like he stopped peeing, his organs started
Oh,
to go into
buddy.
acute injury failure. He was going into respiratory distress, and like his heart rates were like above 200. He had a fever, all the signs of septic shock. And I'll always remember that I had this doctor, and no one could tell me why. No one had an answer. There was nothing. They were doing all sorts of blood cultures and tests and throwing everything they could at him, different antibiotics and things, and it just wasn't working. And then I had a doctor come in and talk to me, and basically he was just stopping in to say hi and say hi to Leo, and was like, wow, what's going on? didn't
Yeah.
even quite really realize where Leo was at. And he ended up going through this kind of he put a little like birdie in my ear about a potential new diagnosis. And I did the Rosie thing and went home and just started researching like a maniac. And I tried to learn all about this intestinal disorder that Leo got, that we were thinking Leo had. And the next day I came back, Leo's still in septic shock, but doing a little teeny bit better because they changed his antibiotics. And I literally brought in three different case report or not case reports, like full-blown research articles. Like I think one of them was even a systematic review. I'm like showing the doctors, I think this is what Leo has. And one of the doctors actually sat down and talked to me and was like, this makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so she said that she wanted to talk to the general surgery team, and then one thing led to another. We got more testing, and so then they were like, okay, we do think he has this intestinal disorder, which is creating a block in his intestines right now, and we need to go into emergency surgery. And after going through that many surgeries in a row, I think by that point we had done three major surgeries, with the last one causing such trauma to everyone involved. I was like, this is the last thing I want. But basically, what ended up happening is that the doctors would not test him for the intestinal disorder. They basically were like, no, we think he has scar tissue from his previous surgery. So we're going to go in there and we're going to try and clean it up. And so I had this long conversation and kind of had to fight them and basically was like, no, I think he does have this and I need you to test him. And just for anyone that might be going through this, it's called Hirschsprung's disease. And I wasn't sure if I was going to share all the details of all of it, but I think it can be helpful to understand because I think it's often misdiagnosed or not diagnosed at all until someone runs into significant problems. And so what happened was that they didn't want to test him until they were in the surgery. And they ended up testing him while they were in the surgery, came out of it. He was not doing well after that surgery. And then a day later, the doctor calls me and is like, hey, guess what? I'm like, what? He has Hirschsprung's. And he was like, yes, he does. And so what that means now is because they didn't test him before when I was asking, they were going to have to go back in and do another surgery 2 days after he had just had his most recent one. And for a kid that's been through that much trauma and that much general anesthesia and issues with breathing and everything, it was the last thing that anyone wanted to do. And it could have unfortunately been, it could have not happened if someone had listened to me.
Oh my
But
gosh.
they didn't listen to me and they weren't testing him when they should have. And, the surgeon recognized that and even told me like without saying sorry, he basically was like, I am taking accountability for the fact that like how this happened.
Mm.
And then I ended up having to file a complaint with the hospital. And fortunately, like one good thing that came out of all of this is that they did some research and like basically figured out that on day 2 of life, Leo was supposed to have a positive test for Hirschsprung's disease, but the pathology report did not indicate it. And
Oh.
so basically, what they found out was that the pathology report was wrong because it was not read in full. And there was a miscommunication between the surgeon and the pathologist about what was being tested. And so, because of the miscommunication, Leo ended up having 3 extra unnecessary surgeries. Yeah.
Oh my God.
And basically, yeah, went through so much more trauma and was like very missed. That's why he couldn't gain weight. That's why he went into septic shock. That's why we had to wait until December to do the major airway surgery because he wasn't gaining weight. There was so many things that were misplaced because of this misdiagnosis that was so challenging. And so I ended up having this big meeting with the team there and with other people involved with the patient family feedback support group because they ended up telling me they spent hours and hours and hours changing the entire way that they do pathology reports during surgery. They have a very systemized approach now. They have like step one, step two, step three, all because of Leo and their mistake. And so, it's hard to be the person that, makes the change because of that mistake. But I'm grateful that hopefully anyone coming behind us will not run into that same problem because I pushed and because I pushed
Yes.
and told them, where did this fall apart? What was the issue here? Who made this mistake? And like, we need to figure out every little detail about how this won't happen again.
Right.
And so fortunately we got to a place that after that last surgery, he started to thrive, like actually thrive, gain weight. Everything started working well, which should have happened from the beginning, but didn't, unfortunately. And so we get to this beautiful point at the end of his journey where I felt like I had pushed so hard and we're finally there and he's gaining weight and then he comes home and it just was just this really, I don't even know how to explain the feeling. Like, are we really there? Like I couldn't quite believe it.
Totally.
And so we're ending this journey where so much advocacy had to happen. So many changes were happened within the hospital. I still wish that more changes could happen there. There was a lot of things that I would recommend, but he came home and he's this beautiful, thriving baby. And we're navigating what it looks like to have someone that's a little bit more medically complex at home. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that was the end of our hospital journey and kind of shifting into what it looks like to like, yeah, be on the other side of things, which is a whole challenge.
Yeah. Let's get into that, but just so fall 2022 is when this is when you're pregnant, and
Yes.
then I guess I was a history major, so I always like to
Yeah,
string the
I'll
timeline.
I'll
So
string it together.
yeah, please put it together
Okay.
for us.
Fall 2022, I'm pregnant. Um, and then April 2023, I go into the hospital. May, the boys are born. July, Mac and Cruz come home. December is when Leo finally gets big enough to have his major airway surgery, December 2023. And then we go into January 2024. That's when all the Malaysial collapsing
Okay.
episodes happen. And then April, he has his last major surgeries because I pushed for him to be appropriately diagnosed.
Yes.
And then between April and June, we're just working on getting him stable, gaining weight, coming off all oxygen support. And then June, I want to say it was June 15th.
Okay.
June 15th, he comes home. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, he finally comes home. And then we're like, wow, suddenly I am becoming a NICU nurse overnight.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So it was just a lot to navigate, recognizing how much the nurses were doing in the hospital and taking care of things like he has an ostomy, and so learning how to change his bag and taking care of that. He has a G tube, so learning how to feed him through there, giving different meds. When he has a cold and goes into respiratory, like has respiratory issues, we have a different treatment plan for that involving like nebulizers and supplemental oxygen. And so there's a lot of factors that we navigate at home with him. And then, having spent 13 months in the hospital, he was like very behind developmentally. So we have feeding therapy, OT. Fortunately, everyone's coming into the home. And so, yeah, I transitioned from June into July, and suddenly mid-July, I just get hit with like, holy shit, I feel like I'm gonna lose it. I think
Yeah.
having been through all of that and finally coming out the other side, I kind of had a moment to take a breath and be
Hmm.
like, okay, I don't feel good in my body anymore. And I started to recognize, wow, I have been living the past year and a half in absolute survival mode, like fight or flight. And I'm also learning how to take care of four kids, three and under. One of them is very medically complex. Like I'm now home all day, every day. There was just so many things where I recognized, oh, my body doesn't feel good. I feel stressed. I feel anxious. I feel like I'm needing to control everything. I don't know how to like find peace and joy right now. And that's where like the care suddenly shifts where Leo, I feel like is well taken care of. And now I had to turn and look at myself and say, what does Rosie need?
Yes.
And that was hard. I hadn't done that in a long time. And also like Connor and I, we were living in such survival mode that we have what some people would call like we were like in roommate mode, like two ships
Hmm.
passing in the night, like just discussing what needed to be discussed and like, okay, now you go and I go and you go and I go and constantly going
Hmm.
back and forth. And it was finally like, wow, what do we need? And what do
Hmm.
I need? And so, it was from the Leo side of things, it was so beautiful seeing him home and like seeing him start to experience like the world. I'll always remember like, wow, I need to start learning how to take some of like the such simple things in life and not take those for granted. The first walk we ever took him on, he just he didn't go outside for the first year of his life. He wasn't allowed to because he had too many cords and there was too it wasn't safe. He actually wasn't considered safe to be out of the ICU. And so
Oh.
yeah, it was pretty wild. And so the first walk we took him on, that light is challenging.
Yes.
It's okay. The first walk we took him on, he was just like staring bright-eyed, looking at the trees and like the wind. And I remember him like laughing at one point and just like watching like the ocean and just, oh, it brings me to tears just thinking about
Yeah.
like how amazing it was. And then like every moment that he was home and playing with his brothers and his sister, like everyone would always say, wow, is he always this happy? And like, Leo is my happiest kid. He is. He
Oh.
has always been. He is my happiest kid because I think it's because he just recognizes such beauty in life because of so much he's been through. I mean, he is so chill. He's so happy. He smiles and laughs all the time. And it was such a beautiful thing to see and recognize like so much that we take for granted in the simple things, just having our families all home together and just like enjoying a walk together. And I remember Luna so many times, the first few times we took a walk, she would say, our whole family is taking a walk together. Our whole family is
Yeah.
together. And it was just so sweet. Um,
That's so
so
sweet.
yeah, it was beautiful to have him home. And then the shift to like, what does Rosie need
Hmm.
came like someone hit me on the side of the head with a pan.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, I didn't know if you were gonna say something there.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, you were in survival mode for a really long time, and I feel like sometimes as humans, when we go through a period of time where we have to be that way, out of necessity to take care of ourselves or our
Yeah.
families or whatever it might be, that then there does come that moment where it's like we get current. It's like, okay, this,
Yeah.
and our brain and our body goes, okay, now we need to like take care of present tense with more
Yeah.
resource and time. And
Right.
so I mean, it sounds like, and we can cut this or feel free to not answer if this is too medically
No, it's
specific for
okay.
you, but do you have some post-traumatic stress because of this?
I haven't been diagnosed with that
Okay. Okay.
specifically, but I do relate to it. Yes.
Real, okay. Got
Um,
it.
um, so I do work with a therapist, and she hasn't specifically said that, but there was definitely some major periods where I felt like, yes, I must have some PTSD because,
Yeah.
there was one incident where I had to bring Leo back to the hospital when he had a cold, and I
Hmm.
about lost it. And so did
Oh,
he.
yeah.
And that just made it so much worse because I was like, he remembers and I remember, and we're both just
Unbelievable.
like living on the edge. And that was really hard. And so yeah, I think it was hard. From the outside looking in, I knew that I looked like I had it all together. And I think that's what a lot of people feel like see with anyone that's going through some really challenging stuff like this. But
Mm.
I just remember on my birthday, it was on my birthday, and I just was crying.
Yeah.
Crying, wondering like, when is it gonna get easier? When's this gonna get better?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just like Yeah, I just was feeling like really on edge and irritated and triggered often and wanted to control so many things with my kids and also just feeling like such intense exhaustion like deep into my bones that like
Yeah.
I would like lay down on the couch and I have this feeling like I remember excuse me, I remember the feeling where I lay down on the couch and it would feel like my bones were like caving in on each other. Like I'm just sinking into myself because I was
Yeah.
so exhausted. My body's like, that was enough cortisol for a lifetime. Now we're
Yeah,
just gonna
exactly.
be done.
Yeah.
And so I fortunately ended up reaching out to find a therapist, and
Hmm.
I specifically wanted someone that did EMDR, which
Hmm.
is I'm gonna mislabel, but I think it's
I should know this too. Hmm.
eye movement desensitization response, I believe.
Oh, I should know this. I think,
Yes, it
yeah.
is. Oh no, it's
Yes. Okay.
eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Okay.
And
Okay. Thank you for checking that.
yeah, and so it really helped because I was able to go through like traumatic experiences and help my brain rewire the neural connections that I
Hmm.
formed during those. And so the way she explains it to me is when your body goes through trauma, it lays down these neural connections related to the trauma in a disorganized pattern. It just lays them down in whatever which way. They can be like up, down, side to side, however. And basically, EMDR, when you go through the traumatic experience again, but you're doing it with this bilateral movement connecting the right and left sides of the brain, you're actually restructuring and organizing the neural connections. And so
Cool.
it's been really, really amazing and super helpful for me. And I recognize that like my body was definitely still living in fight or flight. It's what
Hmm.
felt safe for me at the time. I knew that if I could be alert and strong enough to control the situation and know exactly what Leo needed, then we would be okay. And
Hmm.
then, like, that state of being really served me while I was in the ICU because he did need someone to take the lead. He needed me to, like, speak for him. And because his traumas were so back to back for so long,
Yeah.
I just was like living in that mode for so
Hmm.
long versus like a one-time experience. And so basically I found that once he was in a safe space, like I didn't know how to move back out of that. I didn't know
Hmm.
how to come back to my body and like unfreeze myself, so to
Hmm.
speak. And one thing that I really like related with, and you hear people all the time that like say that they don't cry or don't know how to cry. And it was this moment where I just felt like, wow, I cry a lot when I have really emotional experiences, or like I'm just a big feeler. It's not like I'm easy to cry, but I'm a big feeler. And I found that I could not have a deep full body cry. I didn't know how to. Like I would have just a couple tears. And I remember one incident in the hospital where Leo was code like had the code button pressed on him, and one of the doctors walked in and he looks at me and he says, "Wow, I do not know how you can be so calm right now." And I'm like thinking in my head, this is not calm, this is dissociation.
Yeah.
I am completely unable to feel right now because
Yeah.
this is so much trauma stacked on top of one after another. And it was in that moment that I was like, "Oh my God, I really want to cry, but I don't know how." I
Yes.
couldn't anymore.
Yes. Hmm.
And I remember telling my sister like, "I just want a full body deep cry, like where your body's
Yeah.
shaking, where you're just screaming into the pillow." And I couldn't do it. And so, I had to like have a therapist tell me, like, Leo's home. He's safe
Hmm.
now. You don't have to hold it all together anymore. You don't
Yeah.
have to be the strong one.
Hmm.
You're allowed to fall apart and things will be okay. And it was just in that moment that I lost it. I was like, "You're right."
Yeah.
Boom. And I
Yeah.
just like bawled my eyes out.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you were able to experience that, and also that it ha t timed so that you were like able to immediately receive therapeutic support. I feel like a lot of times, we talk about flight, fight, but not people sometimes forget about freeze. And
Yeah, I
as
was
somebody,
frozen.
and that's I was relating to you, and you were talking about like it looks like I'm being calm, but I'm actually frozen. And
Yeah.
we could get into my story another day, but I've been in times in my life where it is freeze and you
Yeah,
can't cry and you can't
you
access it
can't.
and you might want you like I know that there would be so much catharsis if I
Yeah,
could get myself up and over threshold because when we go into flight mode, you get
yeah,
that.
right.
You do not get that when you are, and it's literally in your brain. Is it first? And I'm not again, not a medical expert, but it's a
Yeah,
vagal freeze where it is
yeah,
a survival tactic where it just like keeps you pretty much flat, where you're able to like go and do stuff. But it is also tied to that like acute exhaustion you're talking about,
yeah.
where it's like you just are so tired.
I'm
And I mean,
so
you
tired.
had so much sleep debt too, and all the
Yeah,
cortisol
there's
and
so many
everything.
reasons,
But where
but
it's just
still,
like, it is just like the most existentially exhausting feeling to be
it
in that
is.
freeze for long term.
Yeah,
And so I'm really happy you were able to like get the tools and resources and talk to your therapist and have that moment.
right.
Did you feel like after that you were able to be a little more like flexible? I'm using my hands because I'm imagining it's like
Yeah,
in your brain, you're not frozen anymore. It's a little more dynamic. Was that
yeah, and
your
I think
experience?
yes, yes. And but I think that I had slowly been realizing and recognizing that throughout. So I had been
Mm-hmm.
melting, so to speak, but I really
Yeah.
just needed that full body cry,
Yeah.
And I also I think one of the big things is that I needed to be told that I was allowed to not be strong,
Yes, you
you
to be
know.
told you are allowed to not be strong. You are safe right now. You are a
I
safe
I've got
environment.
you.
I've
I'm
got you.
I'm holding
Hmm.
you. I'm
I'm
holding
holding you.
space. I'm holding you to be seen. You can fall apart and it will be okay.
Yes.
And that was huge for me because I think that there was many times where the people around me wanted to hold me, but they almost needed to say, it's okay to
Hmm.
fall apart. You don't
Hmm.
need to be strong because I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to
Hmm.
do it. I needed
Yeah.
I needed a container to be created for that purpose.
Yeah.
And just to show up and be like, I'm here for you was really, really nice. But it was almost like my therapist was like, now is your time to fall apart. And I was like, if you say so,
Hmm.
I needed that container.
Yeah.
Um, and that was really crucial because grief is a challenging thing that I realized I wasn't working through. Like
Hmm.
grief can be so much more than you lose someone, right? Grief
Right.
is you're losing an experience, you're losing love that you were supposed to have. You're losing so many things that are held precious to you. And
Hmm.
it was in that time that I learned like the intense grief was the way an experience was taken from me. I was like grieving all the ways that Leo's babyhood was taken from me, the way
Yep.
their first year flew by without me being able to bask in all the beauty of it, the way I never got to breastfeed him, the way that my like postpartum days were not spent like soaking up newborn snuggles or like I said before, Luna turning into a toddler. I was
Yeah.
grieving so many transitions that I didn't get to experience and I wasn't able to grieve them that entire time because I had to be on.
Yeah.
And so finally I recognized when I got home that I had so much grief pent up in me that was never allowed to be seen. And
Hmm.
it was really creating havoc on the way I felt, the way I moved, the way I interacted with people, the way like I would get triggered if Connor and I weren't being perfect parents for our kids, the way
Yeah.
that I would start to control, being like, oh, like he's crying, pick him up now. Like
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
I have guilt for not being there. He needs to be soothed immediately.
Hmm.
There is so much in like control issues. Like because
Hmm.
I was not allowing myself to grieve my experience, I was holding it all in like absolute dysregulation in my body. And to
Hmm.
be completely honest, I'm still moving through a lot of that. Like I'm
Yeah.
still absolutely learning how to grieve. Like even just last week, I had a session with my therapist where I just like was bawling my eyes out. And she was like, go downstairs. Is your mom there? And I was like, yeah, my mom's here. And she's like, can you go ask her to give you a hug and hold you? And
Oh,
I had a little like, I didn't want to do that. I was
yeah.
like, that means I have to fall apart in front of my mom,
Right.
and
Vulnerability.
I
Hmm.
have to be vulnerable. And I feel like I praise myself on being vulnerable, but
Hmm.
it was like not talking. It's like falling apart.
Yeah.
And and I had to have her tell me, like, you need to do this for you, you know?
Yeah.
And it was so good. And I could tell my mom really loved to hold that space for me too, you know? And so anyways, I'm definitely still moving through it and
Hmm.
all of that, but there are other things I'm trying to do too, like dance and like move my body and just like being frozen literally means you're frozen. So it's like
Hmm.
actually like moving your body, getting the somatic release experience. So yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's like sitting with this pain and grief, recognizing the true challenges and like all the things that I had to go through the past year was so incredibly important. And I had to, and I'm still trying to look grief in the face and say, like, I see you, I
Hmm.
am you. And I
Yeah.
also know that we have to become friends before I can fully come back to me.
Hmm. Well, I'm
Yeah.
really proud of you for doing the work and for being aware of that because I feel like there's a risk when when we trust somebody to say it's okay to fall apart. I know in
Yeah.
seasons of my life or when friends that I have that are going through something, it's like, well, what if I can't pick myself back up again? And I have to. And for you, it's like, I have a husband and four kids and a dog. I like the falling apart can't be forever. What do you mean? But you like that acceptance and doing it
Yeah.
anyway and just trusting the process, you're doing it. And
Totally.
that's just so I hope people hear that and they're like inspired to take the next step of action they need to come back to themselves.
Totally. Thank you. I relate to that feeling like, you know, if I go there, how am I going to come
Hmm.
back out of it? And it brings some quotes to mind that like my sister reminded me of the other day, and they're so simple, but they're so true. It's like
Yeah.
you have to feel it to heal it, and what
Oh,
you
yes.
resist persists.
Oh,
I
love.
know, they're great and it's true. I have fully recognized that like unless I allow this emotion to move through my body, it will take up space and energy that is more challenging and more draining on me than allowing it to move.
Yes.
You know, grief, as any emotion, is fluid, it's energetic, and when you cause it to sit still and pack it down and push it into you, it creates issues. It creates
Yes.
lifelong health issues even, you know? And so it's so important to like recognize where we're being blocked and understand that like, hey, the only way to come back to me and to show up for the people in my life, show up for my dreams and goals and who I am as a person is to feel it. And
Yes.
that's how we become stronger and better people. So
Hmm.
easier said than done, but I do believe that the more you practice it, the easier it gets.
I completely agree with you on that. Yeah. And I do think that we live in a society that encourages us to avoid, numb out, be distant from those feelings, but ultimately the only way, like I love those quotes from your sister, but really the
Yeah,
only way to the other side is through it. Because
it's
avoiding
through
it's
it.
all going to be waiting for you if you don't address it. And it will
Totally.
be, like you said, manifesting in health issues or it just all comes crashing down on you later when you're not being held in a safe container and there's other consequences. So I love that you're doing that work and I
Thank
hope
you.
other people hear that and feel empowered to do the same for themselves.
And one thing that I want to touch on with that I think is
Yeah.
really important is just like recognizing that that it's not important to do that alone. And um, you know, I am doing it with a trained trauma therapist right now. And
Mhm.
whether you're doing it with a trauma therapist or someone that you know, trust, and love is so important because it is helpful to have someone help pull you out of that space, you know?
Yes.
And the challenging thing I think when people go through such intense trauma and grief is that you really need to have somebody with you that is comfortable with themselves, that's comfortable with their emotions because it's really easy, and I ran into this a lot, and nothing bad to say about people that do this, but it was challenging for me, and it actually ended up being somewhat triggering. While I was going through Leo's journey, I ran into a lot of like toxic positivity where
Ooh.
people would like try to just remind me to be grateful for the things that I had. And I was just like, you're basically telling me that like what I'm feeling is not truth, you know, is and you're not you're not comfortable enough to sit with this emotion. And so
Hmm.
I realized that to really be able to hold space for someone else, you have to be comfortable with that side of yourself. And that's really hard. You
So
have to be able
true.
to say, like, I'm coming here to like hold space for you. I'm not going to try and fix it. I'm not going to try and make it right. I'm not going to try and make this less uncomfortable or talk about the positive. It's simply to say, I see you. I'm here for you in whatever way you need. You are safe to show up just as you are, not to try and put on a face for the world. And that by
Yes.
itself is all you need. You just need someone to be there to let you fall apart and witness it. That is it.
Hmm. Totally, totally. I'm so glad that you touched on toxic positivity because with our uniquely qualified community, I am doing everything I can to have us educate people on the fact that saying things like, well, at least you dot dot dot, which
Yeah.
people that is just people seem to just want to offer that up when people are going through trauma or
They
grief,
don't
and it's
know how.
and
They don't know how to sit
exactly.
with it. That's
And as
why.
you were talking about it, it made me realize, oh, it's like another form of avoidance because it's not like actually encouraging somebody to engage in authentic gratitude. It's dismissive of somebody's experience by pointing out something else where it's like, and
It's dismissive.
it's dismissive. And it's about that, like you're saying, it's about that other person's own
Yeah.
discomfort
Yes,
and
100%.
not about you. And so, yeah, in my experience, like you said, finding the right and safe people, whether it's a mental health or medical professional, or maybe it's people in like a grief recovery community. But I think that's where your intuition with navigating Leo's journey was so important. And I think that for a lot of us, like we can gauge also who might be safe and who might not be
Right.
safe when
And
we're in
that's
those moments of vulnerability.
exactly. I think that's the key because you really have to have emotional resilience and emotion and to be at that state in your emotional maturity to handle that kind of scenario. And some people
100%.
just aren't comfortable with that yet. And that's nothing against them. And so
Yeah.
I tried to not take those sorts of things like be mad at them or get triggered at them. It was more
Yeah.
just like they're not comfortable with this. So
Yes.
they're not a person that I'm going to go to fall apart,
Exactly.
and that's
One of,
okay.
yep. One of the things I tell myself in moments like that is I just learned something about that other person and
Yeah.
how I can regard them. And it's not a judgment, but it's like, okay, for me, I just learned that that's not somebody who, when I'm talking about this specific feeling set of issues, that's just
Yeah.
not a safe space for me. I have
Sure.
other people and other resources.
Sure, sure.
Mhm.
And I ended up actually telling a couple people, like, this is not an appropriate thing to say right
Good
now
for you.
because it doesn't
Yes.
feel good to me. And I need you to validate where I'm at right now. And it was family members and people that I love and care truly about. And I think, I'm very grateful they took it very, very well. So I hope they
Well,
learned.
I think that yeah, I think that that's just like such a helpful thing to educate people on
Yeah,
because it
you
is
just
just
don't
such
know.
exactly. And so setting that very healthy boundary, and I'm glad that they had a positive response. If again, that would be
They
another thing
did.
if they had a negative response, like I just learned something about them. It's not about me.
Yeah.
I needed to do
Yes.
this for me. But
Yep.
a lot of people don't know and they mean well, but all we can do is take care of ourselves at the end of the day. And so you've done that in so many ways.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Rosie, are you ready to go to our last questions, every
Yes.
guest? Right. Question number one. If you could go back to right before your pregnancy with your boys, your triplets, what would you say to that younger version of yourself?
I would say life is going to get crazy. Shit will hit the fan. And there will be moments where you feel like you can't possibly pull it together and you gather the strength to make it through the next step or the next day, but you will. You'll learn that you don't actually have to find the strength. I talk about this all the time. As a mama, you just become it.
Wow.
It's a crazy, powerful force within you that just comes. And it will literally rise to the task when you need it the most. Some days you'll have to take it hour by hour
Mhm.
or even minute by minute, but you'll get there. And while it'll often feel like you're drowning, it's hard to see how you make it through. One day you'll finally be able to look back and realize like what a miracle this whole life has been. And that while you've never thought your heart could possibly stretch and crack and expand enough to give love to all four babies, it will. And in this incredibly challenging and trying journey, a big surprise is that you'll also find a new love for you, a new love for the voice you found in yourself, a new love for the way you look at the simple things in life and what a gift they are. Like just having your whole family together on any given day. And, a new love for the ways you've learned to navigate healing to become a better version of you. I mean, you've never been otherwise, so just
Yeah.
don't give up hope.
Mhm.
And there's a damn good life on the other
Mhm.
side of this is just beginning to show. So just take it a day at a time.
Wow. That's, oh man, that got me. Thank you. That was
Thanks.
beautiful.
Thank you. I've been practicing doing that actually. So it's a really beautiful question. Doing something called intuitive journaling, where like the wise woman in you speaks to you and what they would say.
Mm.
And it is incredibly empowering to know that like there is this wise, beautiful voice inside of you that's probably, your inner knowing, your inner child, the part of you that's connected to God,
Mhm.
that has so much wisdom. And it will just come through onto the paper if you let it. It's beautiful. You
That's
should
so
try it sometime.
beautiful.
It's intuitive
Yeah,
journaling. I really like it. So,
I love that. That's what a great tool. Thank you. On the note of tools, question number two, what has been the most helpful tool or resource in navigating your challenges?
yeah, so I don't really know like specifically of one tool.
Sure.
So I kind of am thinking of this much broader and thought of it more like practicing the power of vulnerability.
Mm.
So I have been using that as a tool for myself to practice throughout this entire journey. I first learned about it from the author and researcher Brene Brown. She's got
Mm.
incredible books. So maybe even starting with those books if you don't know her work. But from the get-go of my journey, like I explained before, like throughout my triplet pregnancy and beyond, like I've really shared lots of intimate details, like with my friends and family, and often on social media, not everything. And I found that in sharing, I was allowing myself to actively process it while also like opening the door to let people support me. And I had no idea the amount of support I would receive just by sharing. Talked about before, it absolutely saved me. So it's not like saying, oh, you need to share your vulnerable and challenging stuff on social media, but it's more of just a reminder to like let those people in that you know and love. Let them
Mhm.
in on your journey, let them in on your challenge. You don't need to share once you've made it through the hurdle, once the baby's home from the NICU, once you've gotten pregnant, once you've had all these things. It's share with those that you know and love and that can support you in the moment when you're in crisis. And that showed up for me in a positive way so, so much.
Mhm.
So that's how I'd
Thank
answer
you.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Power of vulnerability. Question number three, the final question. If you could say anything to someone out there who relates to your story, what would you say to them?
This is probably a reoccurring theme that we've been talking about this whole time, but I think I would tell them that this is a season.
Mm.
It's something that I repeated to myself all the time. This is a season, and with all seasons, it will pass. It's not forever. Just take it a day at a time. And I know you're learning to be strong in this moment, and the strength feels absolutely vital, but I encourage you to also find a space to let someone else be strong for you. So you can fall apart for at least a brief moment in time to allow your heart to feel room to feel and breathe and just be exactly as you need to in that moment. Because while it's scary, the falling apart and the letting your emotions be seen is actually often the first step in the coming back to you journey.
Oh my goodness. I can't wait for when you write a book, Rosie, because you have just such a beautiful way with words. I
Thank you.
love
Well,
that.
I thought a lot about, I've been thinking a lot about that. Like, what does that mean to tell someone coming back to this, on this journey? And it's like, yeah, everything we've talked about is just allowing yourself to be and let things flow as they will, so that you can
Mhm.
become the best version of you, and you will if you let yourself.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing
Thank
your
you.
story, the story of your family. This has just been so beautiful and inspirational, and I know that our listeners will feel the same. And so, to our listeners, if you don't already follow us, we are uniquely qualified on Instagram and Spotify. The handle is uniquely qualified pod, and you can just search on Spotify and find us uniquely qualified. If you like what you heard here today, please show your appreciation with a 5-star review and share this episode with somebody you love. Maybe you know somebody who had a NICU baby or had a high-risk pregnancy and you think that Rosie's story will resonate with them. Please pass that along. And if you're feeling inspired and you want to be brave like Rosie and share your story on Uniquely Qualified, please either direct message me on Instagram or email uniquelyqualifiedpod@gmail.com, and I would be happy to amplify your voice. And with that, we just thank you so much for your time and attention. And please remember, we are all uniquely qualified.